On the day his wife was giving birth, the billionaire ran off on a luxury vacation with his mistress. Then the doctor called. His wife was collapsing, and the baby might not survive. His smile vanished, the ocean felt cold, and his heart dropped into darkness. His mistress backed away, seeing the monster he had become. And in a single moment, he realized he might lose the only people who ever truly loved him. But his wife slapped him, a powerful and ultimate revenge. Don't miss the end. It will blow your mind. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. May every woman be wrapped in a grace so powerful that no pain, no regret, and no hardship can ever dim her light. Women are the heartbeat of every home, the quiet strength behind every victory, the gentle love that keeps this world from falling apart. You deserve oceans of respect, mountains of peace, and a lifetime of tenderness. May the Almighty bless your steps, soften your nights, and fill your days with blessings that chase away every sorrow. May your heart always be protected, your worth always honored, and your dreams always rise higher than the sky. You are not just important, you are sacred. My family, why don't you comment more? Your words mean the world to me. Comment below. I promise, with all my heart, I will reply to every single one of you. If your heart believes in respect, like the video. If your soul stands with me, comment, I am with you forever. Let's start with love, together. Craig's hand was sliding up Jane's thigh when the flight attendant's voice cracked through the cabin. Mr. Cummins, there's an emergency call from Memorial Hospital. Your wife has 2 minutes left. And in that frozen moment, he chose the hand on her thigh over the woman dying alone. The private jet hummed at 30,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, champagne bubbles rising in crystal glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Craig had been laughing seconds before, Jane's perfume intoxicating, something expensive and French that she'd bought specifically for this trip. Monaco waited ahead with its promise of sun-drenched beaches, casinos where money flowed like water, and 5 days where consequences didn't exist. They'd been planning this for 3 months, sneaking around, lying to everyone, building this perfect escape. Then the flight attendant appeared, her face pale, a phone trembling in her manicured hand. The phone that wasn't supposed to ring at 30,000 feet. The phone that meant someone had paid serious money to route an emergency call through the plane's communication system. Sir, the hospital has been trying to reach you for over an hour. They say it's critical, life or death. Craig's stomach dropped. The champagne in his glass suddenly looked like poison. He took the phone with hands that had started shaking, pressed it to his ear, heard static and chaos, and someone screaming in the background. A doctor's voice, frantic, barely coherent. Mr. Cummins, your wife is hemorrhaging uncontrollably. We've lost massive blood volume. The baby's heart has stopped twice already. We need immediate consent for an experimental procedure, and we need you here. She's asking for you. She keeps asking where you are. The line crackled with interference. Craig heard machines beeping frantically, urgent voices yelling medical terminology he didn't understand, and beneath it all, a sound that might have been Dora screaming. Or maybe he imagined that part. He'd imagine it for the rest of his life, never knowing if it was real. Mr. Cummins, are you there? We don't have time for this. Your wife is dying. Your daughter is dying. We need you to authorize emergency procedures now. Jane's hand tightened on his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his skin. Her eyes were wide with something that looked like horror, like she was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. Craig, what's happening? What's wrong? The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, professional but urgent. Sir, I'm monitoring this frequency. I understand the situation. We can turn around immediately. 90 minutes, and we'll be back on the ground. I'll have emergency vehicles waiting on the tarmac. Say the word, and I'll turn this plane around right now. Craig stared at Jane, at her perfect face with makeup applied by professionals that morning, at her expensive dress, the one she'd bought specially for the villa in Monaco, At the weekend they'd planned in meticulous detail: the restaurants, the beach club, the hotel suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Mediterranean. 3 months of planning, $50,000 already spent, the villa waiting for them with champagne on ice and rose petals on the bed. Then he looked at his phone, at the dozens of missed calls from numbers he recognized. His mother, Dora's father, the hospital, all trying to reach him, all knowing something he'd been deliberately ignoring because he didn't want this weekend ruined. His wife was dying back there. His daughter he hadn't even met yet, whose name they'd chosen together months ago, who was supposed to be born into his arms, was dying. Everything was dying. "Mr. Cummins!" The doctor's voice was desperate now, breaking. "I need an answer now. Do we proceed with the experimental surgery or not? I can't wait any longer." Craig's mouth opened. His brain was screaming at him. "Turn around, go back, be there, be the man you're supposed to be." But Jane's hand was on his thigh. The sun was shining through the window. Monaco was so close, just another hour of flying. And Dora was strong. Dora would be fine. Doctors always overreacted. First babies took forever. They were being dramatic because that's what hospitals did. They created panic to cover themselves legally. "Do whatever you need to do," Craig said, his voice barely a whisper. Then louder, firmer, the decision made and locked in. "Proceed with the surgery. I authorize everything. Whatever it takes, just do what you have to do." "You need to be here, Mr. Cummins. Your wife is asking for you. She needs—" Craig hung up, cut the doctor off mid-sentence, handed the phone back to the flight attendant, who looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Jane stared at him, all the color draining from her face. "Craig, your wife is dying. Your baby is dying. What the hell are you doing?" "They're overreacting," Craig said, but his hands were shaking so badly that when he picked up his champagne glass, he spilled it all over his expensive pants. The cold liquid spread across his lap like an accusation. "Doctors always overreact. It's their job to be dramatic. First babies take forever. Everything will be fine. We'll be back tomorrow, and Dora will probably still be in early labor, and we'll all laugh about how panicked everyone got over nothing." "Turn the plane around!" Jane's voice was shrill now, rising above the engine hum. "Are you completely insane? Turn the plane around!" Craig tried to kiss her, his lips missing hers, landing awkwardly on her cheek instead. He tasted her makeup, bitter and chemical. "Baby, please. Think about it. We're already halfway there. This weekend cost $50,000. The villa is waiting. The reservations are made. We can't just throw it all away because the hospital is being dramatic. We'll be back tomorrow. Everything will be fine. You'll see." Jane shoved him away hard, her strength surprising him. She stood up, stumbled toward the bathroom in the back of the plane, and he heard her vomiting violently. When she came back 10 minutes later, her makeup was smeared, mascara running down her face, her eyes wild with something that looked like terror and disgust. "What kind of man are you?" she whispered. "What kind of monster chooses this?" Craig didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He turned off his phone completely, refused to look at it, refused to think about what was happening thousands of miles away. He ordered another champagne from the flight attendant, who served it to him with a look of pure contempt. The plane landed in Monaco 90 minutes later. Sunshine, palm trees, perfect weather, a driver waiting with more champagne, and a sign with Craig's name on it. Everything exactly as planned. Paradise delivered as promised. Craig's phone had 47 missed calls by the time he finally turned it back on at the villa. He stood on the balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, watching sailboats drift across blue water, and listened to his voicemail fill with increasingly frantic messages. Helen, his mother, her voice breaking. "Your wife is in emergency surgery. Where are you? Call me back. Craig, call me back right now." Nora, Dora's sister. Dora almost died on the table. The baby almost died. They're both in critical condition. Get home now. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. Get home. William, Dora's father, his voice like gravel and fury. "You better pray they both survive, son. You better pray real hard." And then the text messages started loading. Dozens of them, hundreds. But the one that made Craig's blood run completely cold was from his mother, sent 3 hours ago. Your wife almost died alone on that operating table. Your daughter's heart stopped beating, and you weren't there to say goodbye if she died. And you're posting cocktail photos on your Instagram story. You're posting sunset photos while your family fights for their lives. I saw them, Craig. I saw the photos you posted from the plane. You chose this. You chose a beach over them. You're dead to me. Do you understand? You're dead to me. Craig looked at his Instagram. He'd forgotten. Jane had insisted on posting photos during the flight. Champagne glasses clinking, sunset through the plane window. Her caption, "Monaco bound with my love." His account was tagged. Everyone could see it. Everyone knew. His phone rang. Dora's father, William. Craig's hand shook so badly he almost dropped it. William's voice was cold and dead. "My daughter survived. No thanks to you. Your baby girl is in intensive care. The doctors give her a 30% chance. When you come home, and you better come home, Craig, bring a lawyer. You're going to need one. Because I'm going to destroy you for this. Do you understand me? I'm going to take everything you have and give it to my daughter. Everything." The line went dead. Craig stood on that balcony in Monaco, the most beautiful place he'd ever seen, with champagne in his hand and perfect weather all around him, and for the first time in his life, understood with devastating clarity that he'd just destroyed everything that mattered in a single choice. That there was no coming back from this, that he'd chosen paradise and found hell instead. Inside the villa, he heard Jane crying, heard her on the phone, her voice desperate. "I need a flight home tonight. I don't care what it costs. I need to leave right now." Craig finished his champagne, watched the sun set over the Mediterranean, and knew that when that sun rose again tomorrow, his entire world would be ashes. Hook. Jane emerged from the bedroom at midnight with her packed suitcase, face streaked with tears and ruined makeup, looking at Craig like she'd never seen him before. "I thought I loved you," she whispered. "I thought we were just two people who found each other, but I was sleeping with a monster. I was sleeping with someone who could let his wife die for a vacation. Don't call me, don't follow me, don't ever contact me again." She walked out into the Monaco night, leaving Craig alone in a villa that cost $50,000, surrounded by champagne and sunshine, and the knowledge that he'd just murdered his family for it. Chapter 2. The Burial. Dora didn't cry when Craig walked into that hospital room. She simply looked at him with eyes so empty and cold that he finally understood he wasn't walking into a reunion. He was attending the funeral of everything they'd been. Craig stood in the doorway of the hospital room, clutching wilted flowers he'd bought from the gift shop downstairs because the airport had been closed by the time his red-eye flight landed. He'd been rehearsing his speech for 6 hours, on the plane, in the taxi, in the elevator coming up. The apologies, the explanations, the promises about how he'd make this right. He had it all planned out. The exact words he'd say, the way he'd drop to his knees, the tears he'd cry. He'd practiced it all. But the woman in that hospital bed wasn't his wife anymore. She was a stranger who'd learned to survive without him, who'd looked death in the face and walked away, changed, who'd become something harder and colder and infinitely stronger than anything Craig had ever known. Dora's body was a map of trauma that told a story Craig hadn't been there to witness. IV lines snaked from both arms like mechanical vines. Bandages wrapped her entire abdomen where they'd cut her open from hip to hip, trying to stop the bleeding. Her face was grey, not pale but actually grey, the colour of someone who'd lost most of their blood. Her eyes were sunken, ringed with bruises that made her look decades older. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. And in her arms, covered in even more tubes and wires than Dora herself, was Ruby, his daughter, the baby he'd never met. A tiny, fragile thing that looked more like a science experiment than a human being. Tubes in her nose, her mouth, her tiny arms, wires attached to her chest, machines beeping and hissing around her, keeping her alive because her body hadn't figured out how to do it on its own yet. "Dora, baby, I'm so sorry." "Don't." Her voice was flat, dead, like all the emotion had been burned out of her and only ashes remained. "Don't call me that, don't say you're sorry, just stand there and listen." Craig's prepared speech died in his throat. He stepped forward, reaching for her. Dora flinched away like he was poison, pressing herself back against the hospital bed, her arms tightening protectively around Ruby. "Your mother hasn't called you yet?" Craig's mind scrambled. "She's upset. I know she is, but she'll calm down. She always does. Moms forgive their kids, right? She'll forgive me. Once she understands, she's downstairs right now with my lawyers, signing an affidavit against you." The room tilted. Craig grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. "What? What are you talking about?" Dora's eyes never left his face. She watched him like a scientist watching an interesting specimen under a microscope. "Helen held my hand while I almost bled to death on that operating table. She stood there for 7 hours while they cut me open and tried to stop the hemorrhaging. She watched them shock me back to life when my heart stopped. She held Ruby when this baby's heart stopped beating, when the monitors went flat and the doctors had to use those tiny paddles on her chest. She made a choice in those moments, Craig. You or me. And she chose me." The door opened behind Craig. He turned to see his mother Helen enter, followed by Dora's younger sister Nora. Helen wouldn't look at Craig, wouldn't even acknowledge he was standing there. She walked straight past him like he was invisible, went directly to Dora, leaned down and kissed her forehead with infinite gentleness. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Helen's voice was soft, loving, tender, the voice Craig remembered from his childhood, but it wasn't for him anymore. "Tired," Dora whispered. "Everything hurts." "I know, baby, I know." Helen touched Ruby's tiny hand with one finger, her face transforming with love. "And how's our little fighter doing?" "The doctor said her vitals are improving, slowly, but improving. That's my granddaughter, strong like her mama." Craig tried to speak. "Mum." Helen finally looked at him, and the expression on her face, the cold, absolute hatred, made Craig take a step backward. "I don't have a son." 4 words. That's all it took to end 38 years of being someone's child. Craig's voice cracked. "Mom, please, I can explain. I panicked. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't think. You didn't think about your wife bleeding to death. You didn't think about your daughter's heart stopping. You only thought about yourself and your mistress and your vacation. So I've done some thinking too. I've thought about what kind of man I raised, and I've decided I didn't raise you at all, because the son I raised would have turned that plane around." Nora stepped forward, holding a thick folder. She handed it to Dora, who opened it slowly, wincing at the movement. She glanced through the papers inside, then slid them across the bed toward Craig. "Read page 7, Dora said, her voice still that terrible flatness. "The highlighted section." Craig's hand shook as he picked up the document. The words swam in front of his eyes. "Prenuptial agreement, section 12, clause 4. He read it 3 times before his brain could process what it said. "In the event of proven infidelity or abandonment during pregnancy or childbirth, the injured party shall receive 75% of all marital assets, immediate forfeiture of all jointly held properties, irrevocable termination of all business partnerships established through the injured party's family connections, and immediate dissolution of any financial arrangements made through family investments." "You can't," Craig started. "Your flight records," Dora interrupted, pulling out another document from the folder Nora had brought, "showing you continued to Monaco after the emergency call, your Instagram posts, time-stamped in Monaco while I was on the operating table. Jane Asher's sworn testimony. She contacted my lawyers herself, told them everything, how the doctor called, how the pilot offered to turn around, how you chose to keep flying. She gave us everything, Craig, every detail. She was horrified by what you did." Craig felt like he was drowning. "My lawyer said that clause was just boilerplate, that it would never hold up. Your lawyer was wrong." Dora pulled out more papers. "My father is calling every investor you have, every business connection you built using my family's name and money. He's pulling them all. The company you think is yours? It was built on my father's loans and Helen's seed money. They're calling it all in. By end of business today, you won't have a company anymore. But the company is everything I've worked for. Helen is transferring her entire estate to me, while she's still alive. The properties, the investments, everything. She's already signed the paperwork. You're going to walk out of this marriage with your 25% of whatever's left, and that's it. Everything else is mine. Craig looked at his mother, at this woman who'd given birth to him, raised him, believed in him. Mom, you can't do this. I made a mistake. One mistake. People make mistakes. Helen spoke, and her voice could have frozen the sun. I gave birth to you in a room exactly like this one. I held you and counted your fingers and toes and promised God I'd raise you to be a good man. I fed you when you were sick. I sat up with you through nightmares. I put you through the best schools. I gave you seed money for your business. I introduced you to Dora because I thought you deserved someone that wonderful. I taught you the difference between right and wrong, and you threw it all away. You threw away your wife, your daughter, your integrity, your soul, all of it for a whore on a beach. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was choosing evil. So yes, I'm doing this. I'm giving Dora every penny I have, and you'll inherit nothing. Not one photograph, not one memory, not $1. Nothing. Craig tried to move toward the bed, to touch Ruby, to prove she was real. Nora stepped between them immediately, phone already out. Hospital security is on speed dial, Nora said calmly. One step closer, and you're arrested for violating hospital safety protocols. The restraining order paperwork gets filed tomorrow morning. You want to never see your daughter again? Take one more step. I have rights. Craig's voice rose, echoing off the sterile walls. Other patients' families in the hallway stopped to stare. She's my daughter. I'm her father. You can't keep me from my own child. Dora finally showed emotion. She smiled. But it wasn't a smile. It was something cold and satisfied and terrible. It was the smile of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable and come out the other side made of steel. You had rights. You lost them when you chose paradise. There's a family court judge who's a very close friend of my father. She has 3 daughters of her own. When she reads the testimony about how you abandoned your wife in childbirth to continue your vacation with your mistress, when she sees the Instagram posts you made while your daughter's heart was stopping, she's going to destroy you in court. You'll get supervised visits if you're lucky. 1 hour a month in a room with cameras and social workers watching your every move. Maybe. If the judge feels generous. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Large men with impassive faces and hands that rested on their belts near their radios. Mr. Cummins, one of them said, his voice professional but firm. You need to leave the hospital immediately. You're upsetting the patients. Craig looked at his mother one last time, desperate for any crack in her armor. Mum, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll change. I'll be better. Just give me a chance. Helen turned her back on him, walked to the window, stared out at the parking lot below, refused to acknowledge he existed. As the guards took his arms and escorted him down the hallway, past nurses who whispered and pointed, past other patients who pulled their families closer, Craig heard Dora's voice one last time, carrying down the corridor. I'm not just taking your money, Craig. I'm taking your entire world, and I'm going to make you watch me rise without you. I'm going to become everything you never imagined I could be, and you'll know, every single day for the rest of your life, that I did it all after you tried to kill me. Hook. In the parking lot, Craig sat in his rental car for 3 hours, unable to start the engine, unable to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that made his hands go numb. This is Attorney Bernard Chen, representing Dora Bryan. The divorce petition will be filed at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't bother going home. The locks have been changed, and your belongings will be delivered to whatever address your attorney provides. You have 48 hours to retain counsel. See you in court, where I'm going to enjoy destroying you. Chapter 3. The Execution. In 6 weeks, Dora dismantled Craig's life with surgical precision, not out of rage, but with the cold efficiency of someone burying a corpse that's already dead. The courtroom was sterile and bright, fluorescent lights humming overhead like mechanical insects. Craig sat at the defendant's table in a wrinkled suit he'd slept in for 3 days, his lawyer nervously shuffling papers that neither of them believed would make any difference. The evidence was too overwhelming. The prenup was too clear. The testimony was too damning. Across the aisle, Dora sat perfectly composed in a black dress that probably cost more than Craig's rent. Her posture was straight, despite the healing wounds beneath her clothes, despite the exhaustion carved into her face like canyons. Her uncle Bernard, one of the city's most ruthless and expensive divorce attorneys, sat beside her with a briefcase full of Craig's destruction organized in neat, color-coded folders. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and absolutely no patience for nonsense, reviewed the prenuptial agreement for what felt like the 100th time. She kept reading certain sections, her expression growing darker with each pass. "Mr. Cummins," Judge Morrison said, looking at Craig over her reading glasses, "did you personally review this document before signing it, or did your attorney at the time advise you of its contents?" "Yes, Your Honor, I reviewed it. My attorney went over it with me, but I didn't think—" "You didn't think your wife would enforce it?" The judge's eyebrow raised in an expression that managed to convey both disbelief and disgust. "Or you didn't think you'd commit the exact actions specified in the penalty clause?" Craig's lawyer jumped in quickly, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. "Your Honor, my client absolutely acknowledges that he made an error in judgment, a terrible error. But the 75% asset division specified in the agreement is excessive and punitive. We're requesting the court consider a more equitable distribution." "Excessive." Dora's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. She stood slowly, each movement clearly causing her pain. "May I address the court, Your Honor?" Judge Morrison nodded. "Go ahead, Ms. Bryan." Dora walked to the center of the courtroom, no limp, no visible weakness, just pure iron will holding her body together through sheer force. She pulled out a medical file folder that was several inches thick. "These are my medical records from Memorial Hospital," Dora said, her voice steady and clear. "I lost 60% of my total blood volume. That's nearly enough to kill someone twice. My heart stopped twice during emergency surgery. I had a stroke on the operating table due to blood loss. The doctors gave me less than a 20% chance of survival. My daughter had 3 separate cardiac arrests in her first week of life. She was given a 30% chance of surviving to her first birthday." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing to listen. "While this was happening," Dora continued, turning to look directly at Craig, "my husband, the man who promised to love me in sickness and health, was posting photos of sunset cocktails with his mistress on social media. The hospital called him during his flight with an emergency. The doctor begged him to come back. The pilot offered to turn the plane around, and he refused. He chose to continue to his vacation while I died alone." Dora's voice finally cracked slightly. She cleared her throat, regained control. "Excessive? I think keeping 75% of the money his mother gave him, that my father's business connections helped him build, is more than fair. I think not demanding he be charged with criminal neglect is generous. I think allowing him to keep his 25% instead of taking absolutely everything is more mercy than he showed me when I was bleeding to death on that operating table, begging the nurses to call him again, believing he would come, believing he would choose us." Judge Morrison looked at Craig like he was something rotting on her courtroom floor. "Mr. Cummins, I'm approving the 75% asset split as specified in the prenuptial agreement you voluntarily signed. Furthermore, I'm granting an immediate restraining order. You will maintain a minimum distance of 500 feet from Ms. Bryan, her residence, and the minor child at all times. Supervised visitation will be determined at a later hearing, pending psychological evaluation and anger management certification. Do you understand?" Craig couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. His lawyer answered for him in a defeated whisper. The asset division process took 3 brutal weeks. Craig's tech company, the thing he'd spent a decade building, the thing he thought of as his identity, was dismantled piece by piece like a car in a chop shop. Dora's father, William, made phone calls. That's all it took. Personal calls to every major investor. The message was simple, delivered in William's gravelly voice that had intimidated corporate boardrooms for 40 years. Craig Cummins abandoned his wife and newborn daughter in a medical crisis to continue a vacation with his mistress. My daughter almost died. My granddaughter almost died. Do you want to continue doing business with a man like that? Do you want your company's name associated with someone who could do something like that? Because I promise you, I'll make sure everyone knows who your partners are. The investors fled, not slowly, not with consideration or deliberation. They fled like people escaping a building fire, trampling each other in their rush to distance themselves from Craig's toxicity. Within 2 weeks, Craig's company had lost 80% of its funding. The board called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Craig as CEO. They offered him a humiliating severance package that was barely enough to cover 3 months of rent. Craig's luxury condo in the downtown tower, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who knew his name, had been purchased with a down payment from Helen. It went to Dora. The vacation home in Aspen that Craig had been so proud of, also Helen's money, went to Dora. The investment portfolio they'd built over their marriage split according to the prenup, 75 to 25. Craig watched his net worth evaporate from $8 million to just under $1 million in a matter of weeks, and from that million, legal fees ate another $300,000. His divorce attorney, the one who'd promised to fight, to find loopholes, to protect Craig's interests, threw in the towel after the second court appearance. "There's nothing to fight for," the attorney said bluntly. "You signed the prenup. The evidence is overwhelming. Your own mother is testifying against you. Cut your losses and take the settlement." Craig moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood he'd never visited when he was rich. The kind of place with thin walls and questionable stains on the carpet and neighbors who played loud music at 3 a.m. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions because everyone had something to hide. His first night there, Craig lay on a mattress on the floor. His actual bed had been sold to pay the movers, and stared at water stains on the ceiling. He could hear his neighbors fighting through the walls, a baby crying somewhere down the hall, sirens passing outside. This was his life now. Meanwhile, Dora's life became something else entirely, a brutal rhythm of survival that would have broken most people but somehow forged her into something stronger. She'd been released from the hospital after 2 weeks, still weak, still healing, her abdomen covered in staples that pulled every time she moved. Ruby remained in the NICU, hooked to machines, fighting infections, struggling with every breath. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but made no promises. Dora moved into Helen's guest house because she couldn't bear to be in the home she'd shared with Craig, couldn't walk through rooms full of memories of someone who'd tried to let her die. Helen's guest house became a sanctuary, quiet, safe, full of a mother-in-law who'd chosen her over her own son. Every morning at 6 a.m. before the sun rose, Helen drove Dora to the hospital. Dora would sit beside Ruby's incubator for hours, her hand pressed against the warm glass, talking to her daughter in a voice hoarse from crying. She read picture books to a baby who couldn't hear her yet. She sang lullabies she'd learned from her own mother. She told Ruby about the life they were going to have together, about all the things they'd do, about how Mama was going to make sure she had everything she needed. The NICU nurses learned to recognize Dora, started leaving a comfortable chair by Ruby's incubator, would bring her coffee without asking. One nurse named Patricia, a woman in her 50s who'd been doing this for decades, sat with Dora one night when Ruby's heart monitor showed irregularities. "I've seen a lot of mothers come through here," Patricia said quietly. "The ones who make it through are the ones who find something beyond the fear. You finding anything?" Dora looked at her daughter, this tiny person who'd almost died because her father chose a beach over her life. "I'm finding anger," Dora said. "I'm finding rage. Is that enough?" Patricia smiled slightly. Honey, rage is fuel. Use it. So Dora did. During the hours when Ruby was stable, when the doctors said it was okay to step away, Dora started learning her father-in-law's business, Helen's commercial real estate empire that she'd built over 40 years, properties all over the city, millions in revenue, dozens of employees. "I want you to take over," Helen said one afternoon, sitting in her office with Dora, spreadsheets and contracts spread across the desk. "Not eventually. Now. I'll teach you everything, but you're going to learn fast because you'll need something to focus on when Ruby comes home. You'll need something that's yours." "I don't know anything about real estate." "You know how to survive," Helen interrupted. "That's all business really is. Surviving and making the other person blink first. The rest is just numbers and contracts and reading people. I'll teach you those parts." So between hospital vigils, Dora learned, she studied lease agreements while sitting beside Ruby's incubator. She reviewed property valuations during late-night pumping sessions in the hospital lactation room. She attended tenant meetings and stayed silent in the corner, watching how Helen negotiated, how she read people, how she knew exactly when to be firm and when to show mercy. Her mind, desperate for something other than hospitals and heartbreak and the constant terror of losing Ruby, absorbed everything like a sponge. The distraction was oxygen. The learning was survival. Craig tried to contact Dora relentlessly during those first weeks. Flowers arrived at the hospital. Dora had the nurses throw them away without looking at the cards. Letters came to Helen's address. Dora burned them in the fireplace without opening the envelopes. He called from different numbers, hoping she wouldn't recognize them. She blocked each one the moment she heard his voice. Finally, Craig sent a 20-page handwritten letter via certified mail. He'd spent days writing it, pouring out his regrets and apologies and promises. He'd been in therapy. He'd cut off all contact with Jane. He was trying to be better. He just needed Dora to give him a chance to prove it. The letter arrived at Helen's house on a Tuesday morning. Dora sat at the kitchen table, holding the unopened envelope, staring at Craig's handwriting on the front. Nora was visiting, sat across from her with coffee. "You going to read it?" Nora asked carefully. "No." "Want me to read it to you?" "No." Dora turned the envelope over in her hands. It was thick, heavy. He'd spent time on this, put thought and effort into trying to reach her. She didn't care. Dora picked up a pen from the counter and wrote across the front in large block letters, "Return to sender. You're already forgotten." She handed it to Nora to mail back. That night, Dora sat in Ruby's nursery at Helen's house, the room Helen had prepared with a white crib and soft toys and curtains with little stars on them, the room waiting for a baby who might never come home. Dora sat in the rocking chair in the dark, her body aching from healing wounds, her mind aching from everything else. Helen found her there at midnight, sat on the floor beside the rocking chair. They didn't speak for a long time, just sat together in the darkness of an empty nursery. Finally, Helen said, "I'm sorry I raised a man who could do this to you." Dora reached down, touched Helen's silver hair. "You didn't raise that man. You raised someone better. He chose to become this." "I'm leaving you everything," Helen said. "The properties, the investments, the business, all of it. I've already changed my will. I had my lawyer write it up yesterday. Craig gets nothing, not one penny." "Helen, you don't have to do that." "Yes, I do, because you're the daughter I should have had, because Ruby is my granddaughter and she deserves everything I can give her, and because my son is dead to me. The boy I raised died on that plane when he chose to keep flying. What came back isn't my son, it's a stranger wearing his face." They cried together in the dark nursery, mourning different losses. Dora mourning the husband who'd betrayed her, Helen mourning the son who'd never really existed. Hook. The next morning, Craig received an envelope from Helen's attorney. Inside was a single document, Helen's updated will, showing every single asset transferred to Dora Bryan and Ruby Bryan, and attached to it a handwritten note in Helen's elegant script that Craig would read 1,000 times, memorizing every word. "You are no longer my son. Do not contact me again. Do not come to my house. Do not attend my funeral when I die. You are nothing to me now. You are less than nothing. You are the mistake I can never undo, the failure I will regret until my last breath. I hope you live a very long life, Craig, because I want you to feel this loss for decades. I want you to watch Dora thrive without you. That's my gift to you, a long life full of regret." Chapter 4. The First Failed Reunion. Craig waited outside the hospital for 8 hours in freezing rain before Dora finally came out, and the 5 words she spoke destroyed him more than any divorce papers ever could. "You have no daughter here." The rain had started at dawn, the kind of cold November rain that seeps through everything. Coat, shirt, skin, bone. Craig stood across the street from Memorial Hospital's main entrance, hood pulled up against the downpour, watching the automatic doors slide open and closed as people came and went. Doctors finishing night shifts, families visiting sick relatives, people living their normal lives, while Craig's had disintegrated into standing in freezing rain, hoping for a glimpse of what he'd destroyed. He'd heard through a former colleague, someone who still had connections to Dora's social circle, who'd mentioned it casually over drinks, that Ruby was being discharged today. After 4 months in the NICU, after countless surgeries and setbacks and midnight scares, she was finally healthy enough to go home. Craig had to see her, had to see them. Just one glimpse to prove they were real, that they still existed, that there was something left worth saving. His shoes had been soaked through hours ago, water pooled in them, his socks squelching with every shift of weight. He'd lost his job 3 weeks ago, fired for drinking during lunch, for missing deadlines, for the viral video of his hospital confrontation that 100,000 people had watched. Now he was working part-time at a telemarketing call center, making barely enough to cover rent, living off the rapidly dwindling remains of his 25%. Every dollar counted now. Every expense felt like bleeding. People rushed past with umbrellas, their faces hidden, their lives continuing normally. Taxis splashed through puddles that soaked Craig's already wet pants. He didn't move, couldn't move. This was all he had left, standing in the rain hoping for 5 seconds of seeing them. At 4 in the afternoon, after 8 hours of waiting, the hospital doors finally opened and Dora emerged. Craig's breath caught so hard it hurt his chest. She looked completely different. Thinner, sharper, like she'd been carved from something harder than flesh and bone. Her hair was pulled back severely. She wore dark clothes that made her look older, more austere. This wasn't the woman he'd married. This was someone forged in fire he'd lit. Dora's sister Nora pushed a wheelchair carrying Ruby's car seat. The baby was bundled in pink blankets, just a tiny face visible, eyes closed against the grey afternoon. Helen followed behind, carrying bags stuffed with medical supplies and discharge papers. Just 3 women and a baby. No Craig, no space for Craig, no need for Craig. He couldn't help himself. He ran across the street, dodging honking cars, rain pouring down his face, mixing with tears he didn't remember starting to cry. "Dora! Dora, please!" She froze mid-step, turned slowly, carefully, like someone hearing a dangerous animal behind them. Her face showed no surprise, just exhaustion. Like she'd been expecting this, like she'd been dreading it. 5 seconds, Craig gasped, water streaming from his hair into his eyes. "Just let me see her for 5 seconds, please, Dora. I won't touch her, I won't come close. I just need to see she's okay, that's all. Please." Dora looked at him for a long moment, studying him like she was trying to remember who he used to be. Then, "No. She's my daughter. You have no daughter here." The words hit Craig like physical blows. He actually stumbled backward. "What? What do you mean? She's mine." Dora's voice was completely flat, emotionless, like she was discussing the weather. "She's mine because I'm the one who almost died bringing her into this world. I'm the one who sat beside her incubator for 4 months while she fought to stay alive. I'm the one who learned to work her feeding tube, to monitor her oxygen levels, to recognize the signs of distress. You're just the sperm donor who chose not to show up. Craig tried to step closer. Nora moved between them immediately, phone already out, finger hovering over the emergency call button. I've got hospital security on speed dial. You're currently violating the restraining order's spirit, if not its letter. You're 500 feet away, but you're clearly harassing her. One more step and I'm making the call. I'm not violating anything. Craig's voice rose, desperate and breaking. I'm on public property. I have every right to be here. I just want to see my baby. That's not illegal. That's not... You don't have a baby, Dora interrupted. You have a biological connection to a child you've never met. That's not the same thing. Helen stepped forward then, and the look on her face made Craig physically recoil. This woman who'd raised him, who'd kissed his scraped knees and helped with his homework and believed in him when no one else did. She looked at him now with such absolute contempt that it was worse than hatred. Hatred at least meant he still mattered enough to hate. If you take one more step toward that child, I will have you arrested for harassment and intimidation, Helen said, her voice deadly quiet. If you contact Dora again in any way, I will use every connection I have to make sure you never work in this city again. And if you ever show up where we are again, at the hospital, at my house, anywhere, I will make sure the rest of your miserable life is spent wishing you died on that plane instead of coming home to make our lives hell. A crowd was gathering. People with phone cameras out, recording everything. Craig heard whispers rippling through the crowd. That's the guy from the video. Abandoned his wife in childbirth, saw it online. What kind of person does that? Craig's eyes found Ruby in the car seat. He could barely see her through the rain and blankets, just a tiny face, perfect and unaware, sleeping peacefully. His daughter who had no idea he existed, who would grow up without ever knowing his voice or his face or his name. I'm sorry, Craig whispered, but the words were swallowed by thunder rolling overhead. I'm so sorry, Ruby. I'm so sorry for everything, baby girl. Dora finally spoke again, and her voice carried across the parking lot despite the rain, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear every word. You want to know why you can't see her? I'll tell you exactly why, and I want all these people with their cameras to hear it too. She gestured to the crowd, to the dozen phones recording this moment for posterity, for the internet, for evidence. This man, Craig Cummins, had a choice. His wife was dying in emergency surgery. His daughter's heart had stopped beating. The doctor called him and begged him to turn his plane around and come home. And he looked at his mistress sitting beside him and chose to keep flying to his vacation. While I was bleeding out on an operating table, while doctors were shocking my heart back into rhythm, he was sipping champagne and posting sunset photos to Instagram. While Ruby's heart stopped beating for the third time, while nurses were doing CPR on a baby the size of a football, he was checking into a luxury villa in Monaco. So no, he doesn't get to see her now. He doesn't get to play father. Fathers show up. Fathers choose their families. This man chose himself, and he'll live with that choice for the rest of his life. Someone in the crowd yelled, "You're disgusting!" Another voice, "How could you do that to your family?" A woman Craig didn't know stepped forward, rage on her face. "I hope you never sleep again, you monster." Craig wanted to explain, to defend himself, to make them understand that it was more complicated than it sounded. But there was no explanation, no defense. Every word Dora had spoken was the absolute truth. Dora moved past him toward a waiting car, a black sedan with a driver who immediately got out to help with the wheelchair. Nora and Helen followed, creating a protective circle around Ruby. Craig reached out, not to touch, just reaching, and Helen slapped his hand away so hard the sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. "Don't you dare!" Helen hissed. They loaded Ruby into the car seat base, secured in the back seat. Nora got in one side, Helen in the other, both bracketing the baby like bodyguards. Dora stood by the open door, rain soaking through her coat, looking at Craig one last time. "I survived without you," Dora said quietly, just barely loud enough for Craig to hear over the rain. I almost died and you weren't there, so I learned to save myself. Ruby almost died and you weren't there, so I learned to save her too. We don't need you, Craig. We never did. We're better off without you. And that's what you're going to live with, knowing we're out there somewhere, happy and whole, building a life that doesn't include you. You'll never be part of it. You never will be. She got in the car and closed the door with a solid final thunk. Craig stood in the freezing rain, watching the taillights disappear down the wet street. The crowd dispersed slowly, people muttering to each other, shaking their heads, some still recording with their phones. Security guards approached from the hospital, asked Craig to move along, said people were complaining about him loitering. Craig just walked away, soaked through to his soul, shivering, past the people still recording him on their phones, past the whispers and judgment. He walked for hours through the rain, not knowing where he was going, not caring. Eventually found himself at a bar he didn't recognize, ordered whiskey, broke his sobriety, drank until he couldn't feel the cold anymore, drank until the bartender cut him off, stumbled home to his studio apartment and passed out on the floor. That night, he searched for Dora's name online through bleary, drunk eyes. Found an article from a commercial real estate website. Dora Bryan takes the reins. New manager revitalizes historic property portfolio. The photo showed her in a conference room, looking professional and confident and completely in control. The article mentioned her recent survival of a life-threatening medical emergency and praised her resilience and business acumen. She wasn't just surviving, she was conquering. She was building an empire while he drowned in cheap whiskey and regret. Hook. At 2 in the morning, Craig woke up to his phone buzzing with a text from an unknown number that made his drunken brain struggle to focus. This is Dora's attorney. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'm filing a motion to terminate all your parental rights due to abandonment, harassment, and the child's best interests. You'll receive official notice by end of day. If you have any sense left, you'll accept this gracefully. Stop trying to contact them. You've already lost everything. Now make it official and let them move on. Craig read it 5 times before he passed out again, the phone falling from his numb fingers, the words echoing through his alcohol-soaked brain. You've already lost everything. Chapter 5. The Queen's Rise. While Craig was learning to live on $40,000 a year, Dora was learning to command rooms of men who used to ignore her, and every night she came home to her daughter alone, exhausted, victorious, and realized she didn't need anyone but Ruby. Dora's alarm went off at 5 a.m. It always went off at 5 a.m. now. It had gone off at 5 a.m. every morning for the past year, ever since Ruby came home from the hospital, ever since Dora realized that if she was going to survive this, truly survive it, not just exist through it, she needed to become something more than she'd ever been. She dragged herself from bed in Helen's guest house, every muscle aching. Her body still hurt where they'd cut her open. The scar would hurt for the rest of her life, the doctor had said. Some kinds of damage never fully heal. But Dora had learned to move through pain, had learned that pain was just another sensation to acknowledge and ignore. Ruby's baby monitor crackled softly, the video feed always on, always watching. Dora checked her phone, pulled up the camera app connected to Ruby's nursery. The baby was sleeping peacefully, chest rising and falling with steady breaths, her heart beating strong and regular. Alive, healthy, thriving, alive. That word still felt like a miracle even now. By 5:30, Dora was showered and dressed in one of the expensive business suits Helen had taken her to buy. Dark colors, severe cuts, power clothes, armor for the battlefield that was commercial real estate. She made coffee, drank it black and scalding hot, and reviewed the contracts she'd stayed up until midnight studying. 3 property disputes to resolve, 4 lease negotiations, 2 potential new acquisitions, and 1 contractor trying to defraud them out of $200,000, thinking she wouldn't notice because she was new at this, because she was a woman, because he could get away with it. He was about to learn otherwise. At 6 a.m., Helen emerged from the main house, already dressed and ready. They'd established a rhythm over the year, a dance of survival choreographed by necessity and love. Helen would watch Ruby while Dora worked. They'd share the load. 2 women against the world. Big day today, Dora said, finishing her coffee in 3 gulps. The Riverside property dispute, the 4th Street lease renewal, and I'm firing Mitchell Construction. Mitchell's been with us for 15 years, Helen warned, but there was approval in her voice. He's not going to take it well. He's been overcharging us for shoddy work and hoping I wouldn't notice because I'm new. I noticed. He's gone. Dora's voice had changed over the year. Gotten colder, harder, more certain. She barely recognized it sometimes. Couldn't remember what she used to sound like when she was softer, when she still believed the world would be fair if you were just nice enough. Helen studied her with something like pride. You're good at this. I have to be. Dora grabbed her briefcase, checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked like someone who could command a boardroom, someone who could make grown men nervous. Because coming home defeated isn't an option when Ruby's counting on me. The morning meetings were brutal in the way Dora had come to appreciate. The Riverside property had tenants who were 3 months behind on rent and refusing to leave. They'd brought a lawyer to try intimidation tactics, a man in his 60s with an expensive suit and a condescending smile who kept calling Dora "little lady" and suggesting maybe she should have someone with more experience handle this. Dora let him finish his entire presentation, let him lay out his arguments, let him think he'd won. Then she slid a folder across the conference table. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice calm and cold, "your clients have been cited for 22 separate lease violations over the past year and a half. Illegal subletting documented by our property manager with photographs and testimony from neighbors. Unauthorized structural modifications that violate city code. I have the inspector's reports here. Habitually late rent payments going back 18 months. We've sent warnings. We've offered payment plans. Your clients have ignored everything." Peterson's smile faltered. "Now, Ms. Bryan, let's not be hasty." "I'm not being hasty. I'm being accurate. Your clients have 30 days to vacate voluntarily, or we proceed with legal eviction. You can fight this in court if you'd like. You'll lose. You'll waste your client's money on legal fees that could go toward finding a new place to live. And the end result will be identical. They'll be evicted, but with the added bonus of an eviction on their rental history, making it nearly impossible to find decent housing elsewhere." Peterson blustered, raised his voice, tried intimidation. Dora waited him out with the patience of someone who'd survived worse than loud men in conference rooms. "What are you offering for voluntary departure?" Peterson finally asked, defeated. 2 months of moving expenses and a neutral rental reference. That's generous considering they owe us 9 months of back rent. They took the deal, signed the papers, left the conference room deflated and resentful. Dora moved immediately to the next meeting. The 4th Street lease negotiation was with a corporate tenant trying to lowball the renewal price. The representative was a man in his 50s named Harrison, who kept calling Dora sweetheart and honey and asking if Helen or William was available to handle the real negotiations. Dora let him talk. Let him lay out his insulting offer. Let him think his condescension was working. Then she opened her own folder. "Mr. Harrison," she said, sliding documents across the table, "your company has been significantly understating its actual occupied square footage for the past 4 years. We had an independent architectural survey done last month. You're actually using 3,000 square feet more than you're paying for. At current market rates, you owe us approximately $190,000 in back rent." Harrison's face went from condescending to panicked in seconds. I wasn't aware. Whether you were aware or not doesn't change the mathematics. So here's what's going to happen. You'll sign the new lease at current market rate based on your actual square footage, plus a 15% good faith adjustment for the years of underpayment. Or I'll file a lawsuit by close of business today, and I'll make sure every commercial tenant in this city knows your company manipulates measurements to avoid paying fair rent. Your choice. You have 5 minutes to decide. Harrison signed. The contract was worth an extra $500,000 over the lease term. By lunch, Dora had saved the company nearly $750,000 and renegotiated 2 major contracts, but there was no time to celebrate. She grabbed a sandwich from a deli, ate it in her car while driving to Ruby's physical therapy appointment. The baby was doing amazingly well. The doctors were constantly impressed, but every milestone still required work. Therapy 3 times a week, cardiology appointments every month, constant vigilance. Dora sat in the waiting room, still in her business suit, watching through the glass as Ruby worked with the physical therapist. The baby was 15 months old now, trying so hard to walk, falling, getting back up, trying again, so determined, so strong, so alive. She gets that determination from somewhere, the therapist said, smiling at Dora. Wonder where? Dora didn't smile back. She couldn't afford to be soft. Not now, maybe not ever again. She gets it from having no choice, like me. The afternoon was more meetings, a potential property acquisition that required reviewing complex financial projections, a dispute with a city inspector that Dora resolved by producing documentation that proved the inspector had gotten his facts wrong. An interview with a local business magazine who wanted to profile the woman who turned around a struggling real estate empire. Dora gave them the same answers she'd practiced. Yes, she'd survived a medical crisis. No, she didn't want to discuss details. Yes, she was raising her daughter alone. Yes, it was hard but worth it. No, she didn't have time for a personal life. Business and motherhood were all consuming. The interviewer, a young woman barely out of college, asked, "Do you ever regret not having a partner to help share the load?" Dora's answer was immediate. No. I learned that relying on someone else is dangerous. I'm enough on my own. My daughter and I are enough together. We don't need anyone else. Evening meetings ran until 7 p.m. Property management issues, budget reviews, staff evaluations. By the time Dora got back to Helen's house, Ruby was already asleep. Dora stood in the nursery doorway, watching her daughter breathe, this tiny person who'd almost died, who'd fought so hard to be here. Helen appeared beside her with a plate of food. "You didn't eat dinner again?" "I'll eat in a bit. You said that last night, and the night before. You're losing weight you can't afford to lose." "I'm fine." "Dora, I'm fine." Dora's voice cracked like breaking ice. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying desperately to hold everything together. "I have to be fine, because if I'm not fine, if I fall apart, if I show weakness for even 1 second, then what? Who takes care of Ruby? Who keeps the business running? Who makes sure we're secure? I don't get to be tired. I don't get to be scared. I don't get to need anyone. It's just us, just me and her, and I have to be enough." Helen pulled Dora into her arms, let her cry silently against her shoulder, careful not to wake Ruby. "You are enough," Helen whispered fiercely. "You're more than enough. You're extraordinary. But you're also human, and you need to let yourself feel that sometimes." "I can't," Dora whispered back. "If I let myself feel it, I'll break, and I can't break. Not when she needs me." They stood in the dark nursery, 2 women holding each other up, both trying to survive the wreckage Craig had left behind. Meanwhile, across the city in his studio apartment, Craig learned about Dora's success through a former colleague who mentioned it at an AA meeting. "She's supposed to be brilliant, ruthless, turned that whole company around in less than a year. Everyone in commercial real estate is talking about her." Craig went home and searched online, found article after article. Rising star in real estate. The woman who built an empire from tragedy. Single mother CEO defies all expectations. Every article was another knife. Every success she achieved was proof that his existence had been unnecessary. Worse than unnecessary. His presence would have held her back. His absence had freed her to become this. Craig tried to send flowers to Dora's office. They were returned the same day with a note. "Ms. Bryan does not accept deliveries from Craig Cummins." He tried calling her office line. Her assistant said, "Ms. Bryan has asked that you not contact her through business channels. Further attempts will be considered harassment and reported to authorities." He tried email from a new address she hadn't blocked yet. Sent a long message about wanting to be involved in Ruby's life, wanting to prove he'd changed, wanting a chance to show he could be better. Dora's response came 3 hours later. One line: "You had your chance to be part of her life. You chose paradise instead. Accept your decision and move on." Hook. That night, Craig saw it on social media. A post from someone in Dora's business circle. Photos of a charity fundraiser at the lake house, the house where Craig had grown up, his childhood home, except it wasn't his anymore. Dora stood on the deck in an elegant dress, looking powerful and beautiful, holding Ruby, who was laughing, surrounded by business associates and friends. The caption read, "Dora Bryan christens her new lake house estate with fundraiser for maternal health. Young survivor, single mom, ne boss." Craig stared at the photo until his eyes burned, understanding that Dora wasn't just taking his money and his family. She was taking his past, his memories, his entire history, and rewriting it without him in it. She was systematically erasing him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She'd become unstoppable, and he'd made her that way. Chapter 6. The Second Failed Reunion. Craig thought ambushing Dora at Helen's birthday party was his path back to his daughter. Instead, it became the night his mother erased him from the family tree in front of 200 witnesses. The country club was decorated in silver and white, elegant and understated in the way expensive things always are. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. White roses and silver ribbons adorned every table. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. This was exactly the kind of celebration Helen deserved for her 70th birthday. Graceful, beautiful, surrounded by people who loved her. Craig knew he wasn't invited. The invitation list had been very deliberately crafted to exclude him, but he came anyway. He'd been planning this for weeks. Bought a suit from a thrift store because his good clothes were long gone, sold or thrown away during one of his many moves to cheaper apartments. Lost 40 pounds from stress and poverty and forgetting to eat. Looked older than his years, worn down by consequence and regret. The security guard at the entrance checked his clipboard. "Name, sir?" "Craig Cummins. I'm Helen's son." The guard's face remained professionally neutral, but Craig saw recognition flicker in his eyes. Everyone knew the story by now. It had been in the papers, on social media. Local news had done a story about the billionaire who abandoned his dying family. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're not on the guest list." "It's my mother's birthday. I don't need to be on a list to wish my mother happy birthday." "Sir, I have specific instructions that you're not permitted entry. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Craig's jaw tightened. Through the glass doors, he could see the party in full swing, his mother at the center of it all in a beautiful silver dress, laughing, surrounded by people who loved her. And beside her, he saw Dora, wearing emerald green, looking confident and powerful, and nothing like the woman he'd left bleeding, and in her arms, Ruby, bigger now, almost 2 years old, wearing a white dress, her dark curls held back with a silver ribbon. His daughter, his family, his life happening without him like he'd never existed. "I just want to wish my mother happy birthday," Craig said, his voice breaking. 5 minutes, please. That's all I'm asking." "Sir!" Craig pushed past the guard, heard shouting behind him but didn't stop, couldn't stop, burst into the main ballroom where 200 heads turned to stare. The string quartet faltered mid-note. Conversations died mid-sentence. The sudden silence was deafening. Helen stood at the center table, Dora beside her with Ruby on her hip. Nora was there. Dora's father, William, the entire family that had once been his, looking at him with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. Craig walked toward them, and the crowd parted around him like he carried a contagious disease. People pulled their chairs back. Mothers turned their children away. The physical revulsion was palpable. "Mom," Craig said, his voice echoing in the silent ballroom. "Mom, it's your birthday. I just wanted—" "How did you get in here?" Helen's voice was ice. She didn't move toward him, didn't smile, just stared at him like he was an intruder, a threat, a stranger. "I needed to see you, to talk to you. It's been over a year and you won't answer my calls and I just—" Craig's words tumbled out desperate and jumbled. "I made a mistake. I know I did. I've been trying to get better. I'm in therapy, I'm sober, I'm working. I just need you to give me a chance to show you that I'm trying to change. Please, Mom, please. You're not my son. Those 4 words again. They still cut just as deep. Craig stumbled like he'd been physically struck. Ruby started crying, loud, frightened. She buried her face in Dora's neck, little hands clutching her mother's dress, her small body trembling. Dora turned away immediately, bouncing Ruby gently, murmuring soft reassurances that Craig couldn't hear. "You're scaring her," Dora said, her voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. "You need to leave." "I'm her father!" Craig's voice rose, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. 200 people watched him unravel on Helen's birthday. Phones appeared, recording everything. "I have rights. You can't keep her from me forever. This is insane. You can't just erase me like I never existed." Dora turned back to face him, still holding crying Ruby, and her expression was something beyond anger. It was exhaustion, resignation, like she was so tired of this conversation she could barely stand to have it one more time. "You have no rights. The court terminated them. You signed the papers." "I only signed because my lawyer said I'd lose anyway." "You signed because you knew you deserved to lose." Dora's voice cut through his protests. "You abandoned her when her heart was stopping. You chose a beach over her life. Now you want to show up at parties and play father. You terrified her. Look at her. She has no idea who you are. The only parent she knows is standing right here." Craig tried to move closer. William stepped forward. Dora's father in his 70s, but still solid, still powerful, moving with the confidence of someone who'd intimidated corporate boardrooms for decades. "You need to leave, Craig, right now." "She's my daughter. Biology doesn't make you a father." William's voice was quiet but absolute. "Being there makes you a father. Showing up makes you a father. You know who Ruby calls her family? Her mother, her Aunt Nora, her grandmother Helen, the people who were there during her surgeries, during her nightmares, during every single day of her life. You're not part of that. You chose not to be." Craig's eyes found Ruby again. She'd stopped crying, but was still hiding against Dora, peeking at Craig with wide, confused eyes. She didn't know him, didn't recognize him as anything but a scary stranger yelling at her family. "I'm sorry," Craig whispered, but the words were swallowed by the silent room. "I'm so sorry, Ruby. I made the worst mistake anyone can make. I just want a chance to—" "Security!" Helen's voice cracked through the ballroom like a whip. "Remove this man from my party immediately. He's trespassing." 3 security guards appeared, larger than the one at the door, professional, implacable. They moved toward Craig with practiced efficiency. As they took his arms, Helen's voice rang out again, commanding everyone's attention. "I want everyone here to witness this. I want there to be no confusion about my intentions. Craig Cummins is no longer my son. My will leaves everything, every property, every investment, every dollar I possess, to Dora and Ruby. Craig inherits nothing. That is my choice, made of sound mind and clear conscience. He destroyed his family. I'm destroying his inheritance. He means nothing to me now, nothing to this family. He's dead to me." The room was absolutely silent. 200 witnesses to his complete erasure. 200 people who would tell this story for years, who would remember the night Craig Cummins was officially disowned by his own mother at her birthday party. The guards dragged Craig toward the exit. He didn't fight, just went limp, let them pull him out of the ballroom, past the whispers and stares, past people recording with their phones, past his mother who'd turned her back and wouldn't look at him. Outside in the parking lot, the guards didn't let go until they'd walked him all the way to his car. "If you come back," one of them said, his voice not unkind, just firm, "we'll call the police. This isn't your family anymore, man. You need to accept that and move on." Craig sat in his car for over an hour, unable to start the engine, watching through the windows as the party continued without him. watching his mother laugh and dance, watching Dora move through the crowd, holding Ruby, looking confident and in control. Watching Ruby giggle and play with other children, completely happy, completely fine without him. His phone buzzed. Email from Dora's attorney, Bernard Chen. Mr. Cummins, due to tonight's incident, Ms. Bryan is filing for an extended restraining order with enhanced provisions. You are now prohibited from approaching within 500 feet of Ms. Bryan, Ms. Helen Cummins, Ruby Bryan, any property owned by the Bryan or Cummins families, or any event where the aforementioned parties are present. Violation will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Additionally, Ms. Bryan is filing harassment charges based on tonight's behavior and your pattern of unwanted contact over the past year. You will receive official notification within 24 hours. I strongly advise you to retain criminal counsel. This is your final warning. Leave them alone. Bernard Chen, attorney at law. Hook. Craig started his car with hands shaking so badly he could barely turn the key, and as he pulled away from the country club where he'd attended countless family events over the years, birthdays, anniversaries, celebrations, he realized he wasn't just losing his daughter, he was being systematically erased from every place he'd ever belonged. From his mother's life, from his family's history, from his daughter's memory. And the woman doing it, the woman executing this erasure with surgical precision, was the one he'd tried to let die. She'd survived him. She'd become powerful despite him. And now she was removing him from existence piece by piece, and he was powerless to stop any of it. Chapter 7. The Funeral Execution. Helen died on a cold morning in November, and at her funeral, Craig learned that even in death, his mother had one final way to destroy him. She wrote her own eulogy, and she used it to erase him completely. The church was full to overflowing, every pew packed, people standing along the walls. Hundreds of lives Helen had touched over 7 decades, business associates, friends, charity recipients, the families she'd quietly helped through her philanthropic work. Helen had been loved deeply and widely, and her funeral proved it. Craig stood in the very back, pressed against the wall behind the last pew, wearing a borrowed suit because he'd sold his last good one months ago to pay for car repairs. He'd lost more weight, looked hollow, looked like someone slowly disappearing. No one had sent him notification about the funeral. He'd seen the obituary in the newspaper, the small announcement that mentioned services at the First Presbyterian Church at 10 a.m. No one acknowledged him. No one made eye contact. The people standing near him shifted away slightly, creating a bubble of empty space around him, like his grief was contaminated. He was a ghost among the living, present but unseen, there but not there. The casket was closed, covered in white roses, Helen's favorites. Craig remembered buying her white roses every Mother's Day from the time he was 6 years old, remembered saving his allowance to afford them, remembered her smile when he brought them, still damp from the florist's cooler, tied with ribbon he'd chosen himself. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime, like a mother who'd belonged to a different son, a son who'd deserved her love. Dora sat in the front row, Ruby beside her in a small black dress. The little girl was almost 3 now, solemn and quiet, not really understanding death but understanding sadness. She held Dora's hand tight, sometimes leaning against her mother's shoulder, staying close. On Dora's other side sat Nora and William, and extended family Craig barely recognized, the family he'd been born into but no longer belonged to. The pastor began with traditional words about loss and love and eternal rest. Then he picked up a letter from the podium, and Craig felt his stomach drop. "Helen wrote her own eulogy," the pastor said, his voice gentle but clear. "She asked that I read it exactly as written, with no edits or softening. These are her final words, her final testimony." The pastor cleared his throat and began. "I've had a good life, a long life. I built a business from nothing. I raised a child. I buried a husband I loved. I made mistakes and tried to learn from them. I helped people when I could. I hope I left this world a little better than I found it. I thought the greatest joy of my life would be my son. For years that was true. I loved being his mother. I was proud of him. I believed I'd raised a good man who would do good things in this world. I was wrong. When my daughter-in-law Dora was dying in childbirth, when my granddaughter's heart was failing, when they needed him most, my son chose a vacation. He chose himself. He chose pleasure over duty, comfort over sacrifice, selfishness over love. I don't know the man who made that choice. I don't recognize him as my son. The boy I raised died on that plane when he decided to keep flying. What came home was a stranger wearing his face. But then I found a daughter. Dora Bryan showed me what real strength looks like, what real love is. She survived trauma that would have destroyed most people. She raised Ruby alone, through surgeries and setbacks and endless exhaustion. She built a business empire while healing from wounds that will never fully close. She forgave me for raising a monster which is more grace than I deserved. Dora and Ruby are my legacy. They are my family. They are proof that family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by who shows up when everything falls apart, by who chooses love over comfort, by who sacrifices themselves to save others. To everyone here today, thank you for coming. Thank you for the love you've shown me. Please continue that love by supporting Dora and Ruby after I'm gone. To Craig, if you're reading this, you destroyed your family for a moment of pleasure. You lost everything that mattered for something that meant nothing. My final wish is that you live a very long life, long enough to truly understand the magnitude of what you threw away, long enough to watch Dora and Ruby thrive without you, long enough to know every single day that you are unnecessary and unwanted and forgotten. That is my final gift to you, Craig, the gift of a long life full of regret. The church was completely silent. Craig could hear his own heartbeat hammering in his ears, could feel 200 pairs of eyes turning to look at him in the back, seeking out the monster Helen had described. The pastor folded the letter carefully, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Helen also left specific instructions that Craig Cummins is not to be acknowledged at this service, is not to speak, and is not welcome at the burial or the reception following. These were her explicit final wishes. Craig's legs gave out. He slid down the wall, ended up sitting on the floor in the back of the church. No one helped him up. No one came over to check if he was okay. They just watched, recorded, judged. The service continued around him. People gave tributes about Helen's kindness, her generosity, her fierce loyalty to the people she loved, her charity work, her business acumen, her role as grandmother to Ruby. Dora spoke, walking to the front with careful composure, her black dress simple and elegant. Her voice was steady despite tears on her face. Helen saved my life, not just in the hospital, though she did that too, holding my hand while I almost bled to death, refusing to leave my side. But she saved my life in the months and years after. When I had nothing, she gave me everything, her home, her business, her wisdom, her unconditional love. When I was broken, she taught me how to be strong. She showed me that family is a choice, not an obligation, that the people who show up when you're dying are your real family, that blood doesn't mean anything if the person doesn't act like family should. Ruby, Dora's voice broke slightly. Ruby will grow up knowing she had a grandmother who loved her fiercely, who chose her, who left her a legacy of strength and resilience. Helen was the best person I've ever known, and I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. Craig wanted to run, to leave, but his body wouldn't obey. He sat on the floor in the back of the church and suffered through the entire service, invisible and acknowledged all at once, present but erased, grieving but unwelcome. At the cemetery, Craig stood far back, hidden behind trees and headstones. Watched them lower his mother into the ground, watched Dora hold Ruby's hand as the little girl placed flowers on the casket, white roses, of course, watched his entire family gather around the grave, a unit that didn't include him anymore. He tried to approach after the ceremony ended. William saw him first, intercepted him before he could get within 50 feet of Dora. "Leave," William said simply. "You're not wanted here." "She was my mother. She stopped being your mother the day you abandoned Dora and Ruby. She made her choice. Respect it. Leave." Craig left, drove to his studio apartment, sat on his mattress on the floor and stared at the walls until darkness fell and he couldn't see anymore. The will reading was 3 days later. Craig wasn't invited, but went anyway, showed up at Bernard Chen's office building and sat in the waiting room until they couldn't ignore him anymore. Bernard came out personally. "Mr. Cummins, you're not listed as a beneficiary. There's no reason for you to be here. That's my mother's will. I have a right to hear it. You have no rights here whatsoever, but fine. If you insist on making this painful for everyone, come in. Let's make this official." The conference room was crowded. Dora, William, Nora, various cousins and business associates and charity representatives. Craig sat in the corner, like a punishment, like evidence of failure. Bernard read through the document with brisk efficiency. The properties, all 32 of them, to Dora. The investment accounts, $4.8 million, to Dora and Ruby. The personal items to be distributed among friends and charities. Helen's jewelry to Dora, the lake house to Dora, everything to Dora. Craig's name appeared exactly once. "To my biological son, Craig Cummins, I leave nothing. He is explicitly and intentionally excluded from any and all benefits of this estate." Bernard looked up from the document. "There's an attached letter that Helen requested be read aloud in Mr. Cummins' presence, if he chose to attend." Bernard opened another envelope. "Craig, I'm writing this while I'm healthy and sound of mind. I want there to be no question about my intentions, no ambiguity, no room for legal challenge. You will contest this will. You will claim I wasn't in my right mind. You will try to argue that you deserve something. You will lose. I've included letters from 3 separate doctors confirming my mental competency. I've included testimonies from witnesses confirming these are my true wishes. I've included copies of the flight records and medical reports from the day you abandoned Dora and Ruby. I've included Instagram posts you made from Monaco while your wife bled to death. I've made this will absolutely, completely, legally unbreakable. You made your choice on that plane. I've made mine here. You are not my son. You are a biological accident who happened to be born from my body, but you're not the child I raised. That child died when you chose paradise over family. Strangers don't inherit what they didn't earn. Goodbye, Craig. I hope you live a very, very long life. I hope you live to see Ruby grow up beautiful and strong without you. I hope you live to see Dora build an empire that dwarfs anything you ever imagined. I hope you live long enough to fully comprehend what you destroyed. That's my final wish for you. Not death, not peace. Just a long life full of watching everything you lost continue on beautifully without you. Helen. The conference room was absolutely silent. Dora was crying quietly. Nora handed her tissues. No one looked at Craig. Bernard folded the letter. "Mr. Cummins, I strongly advise you not to contest this will. It's unbreakable. You'll spend whatever money you have left on legal fees just to lose. Let it go." Craig stood up on shaking legs, walked out of the conference room, down the hallway, out into the street where it was snowing lightly. He walked for hours, not knowing where he was going, not caring, just walking until his feet went numb and his face burned from cold. His mother was gone. His inheritance was gone. His family was gone. Everything was gone. Hook. That night, back in his studio apartment surrounded by eviction notices and past due bills and his mother's obituary clipped from the newspaper, Craig received one more letter, forwarded from his old address, postmarked the day before Helen died. Inside was a single photo, Helen and Ruby, taken a month before Helen's stroke. Helen was holding Ruby, both of them smiling at the camera, both wearing matching necklaces. On the back, in Helen's handwriting, "My real granddaughter and her real grandmother. The family you lost, the love you destroyed. I'm leaving this world knowing they'll be taken care of. You'll leave it alone and forgotten. That's justice." Craig stared at the photo until his eyes burned, understanding that even from beyond the grave, his mother was still destroying him, still reminding him exactly what he'd thrown away, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Chapter 8. The third failed reunion. Craig thought showing up sober, employed and repentant at Ruby's 4th birthday party would prove he'd changed. But Dora had spent years building walls alone, and she was about to show him they were made of steel. Craig had been sober for 6 months, 6 long months of AA meetings in church basements that smelled like bad coffee and regret. 6 months of therapy sessions with Dr. Patel, who looked at him with professional compassion that somehow felt worse than contempt. 6 months of working construction because it was the only job that would hire him with his reputation destroyed and his resume full of gaps. His body had changed from the work, leaner, harder. His hands were calloused now, scarred from accidents with tools and materials. He'd stopped looking in mirrors because he didn't recognize the man looking back, older, worn, beaten down by consequence and time. But he was trying. He was sober. He was showing up for work. He was doing everything the therapist said. He was becoming someone who might deserve a second chance, someone who might earn a single conversation with his daughter. He heard about Ruby's birthday party through a former business associate who still had vague connections to Dora's social circle. The lake house, Saturday afternoon, 30 kids invited. Craig wasn't one of them, but he went anyway. Because 6 months sober meant he'd learned that the only way through pain was directly into it, that avoiding reality didn't make it disappear. He bought an expensive dollhouse, put it on a credit card that was already maxed out, that he had no idea how he'd pay off. The kind of dollhouse he would have bought for Ruby if he'd been there for her 1st birthday, her 2nd, her 3rd, if he'd been a father instead of a ghost. He wrapped it carefully, wrote a card in his neatest handwriting. To Ruby, on your special day. I'm sorry I haven't been there. I love you. I know I don't deserve to, but I do. Dad. The word dad felt like a lie, but he wrote it anyway. The lake house looked different, transformed. Dora had renovated everything. New paint that was brighter than the somber colors Helen had chosen, new landscaping that was more playful and open, the dock rebuilt with safety rails for children. She'd made it hers, made it Ruby's. Erased the Craig who'd grown up here, who'd proposed to Dora on that dock, who'd believed this would always be his. The backyard was full of balloons and streamers and children's laughter, princess-themed decorations everywhere. A bounce house that hadn't been there when this was Helen's house. Tables full of food and cake and presents. Parents sitting in groups, talking and laughing. Normal people living normal lives. Craig parked on the street carrying the wrapped dollhouse, his hands shaking despite 6 months of sobriety. He could do this. He was calm. He was sober. He just needed Dora to see that he'd changed, that he was trying. He walked around to the backyard gate, opened it. Nobody noticed him at first. Too much chaos, too many kids running around, too much noise and activity. Then he saw Ruby. She was bigger now, beautiful. Dark curls down to her shoulders. Wearing a princess dress that sparkled in the sunlight, surrounded by friends, laughing at something one of them said. So happy, so alive, so completely unaware of the man standing at the edge of her party, the man whose DNA she carried, but who meant nothing to her. Craig took one step forward. Dora saw him instantly. Her face transformed from smiling to stone in a heartbeat. She said something sharp to Nora, who looked up, saw Craig, and immediately started moving toward him. But Dora was faster. She crossed the yard in seconds, grabbed Craig's arm, her grip surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into his bicep, and dragged him toward the side of the house, away from the party, away from Ruby, away from the life he wasn't part of. "How dare you?" Dora's voice was low and furious and controlled. "How dare you come here? To my home? To my daughter's birthday party? Dora, please, I just wanted to give Ruby her present. I've been sober for 6 months. I'm in therapy. I'm working steady. I'm trying to—" "You're trying." Dora's laugh was cruel, sharp as broken glass. "You're trying for 6 months and you want credit. I've been raising your daughter alone for 4 years. I've been trying every single day since you abandoned us. Where's my credit? Where's my applause? I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Dora stepped closer, and Craig instinctively stepped back. This woman wasn't the one he'd married. This woman was forged in fire he'd lit and quenched in his absence. Mistakes are forgetting birthdays. Mistakes are being late to pick someone up. You chose paradise while I bled to death. You've stalked us for years. You crashed Helen's party and terrified Ruby. You violated restraining orders. And now you show up at my home, with a toy, thinking it erases 4 years of absence. Craig held out the wrapped dollhouse. Please, just let me give this to her. Let me wish her happy birthday. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Dora looked at the present, then at Craig. Then she walked to a nearby trash can and dropped the dollhouse in. The expensive, carefully wrapped present hit the bottom with a hollow thunk. She has everything she needs. I'm a father. You're a sperm donor. Dora's voice was flat, final. Fathers are there for first steps, for nightmares, for doctor appointments and scraped knees, and all the tiny moments that make a childhood. You know who was there for Ruby's first steps? Me. Just me. You know who held her through nightmares after her surgeries? Me, who took her to every therapy session, every specialist appointment, every emergency room visit. Me, alone. Always alone. Because you weren't there. Because you chose not to be. I want to be there now. It's too late. Dora's eyes were completely dry. No tears. Just exhaustion that went bone deep. You know what the worst part is, Craig? I don't even hate you anymore. I did, for a long time. But now, I just feel nothing. You're irrelevant. You're a problem I solved by cutting you out. And Ruby? She doesn't ask about you. She doesn't wonder where Daddy is. She has a mother who's enough. I'm enough for her. The words were like punches, each one landing perfectly, destroying him methodically. Craig could hear the party continuing in the backyard, could hear Ruby's laughter. She sounded so happy. Dora, please, I'll do anything. I'll wait as long as it takes. Years if I have to. I'll prove myself. Just give me a chance. I gave you a chance. Dora's voice went quiet in that way that was somehow worse than yelling. I gave you a chance when I was dying and you could have turned that plane around. You gave me your answer then. Now I'm giving you mine. No. She started to walk away, back to the party, back to Ruby, back to the life she'd built without him. You can't keep her from me forever. Craig's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. Eventually she'll ask about me. Eventually she'll want to know. Dora stopped, turned back. You're right. One day she will ask. And you know what I'll tell her? The truth. That her father had a choice, her life or a beach, and he chose the beach. That I raised her alone because he wasn't strong enough to show up. That she's amazing despite him, not because of him. And then I'll let her decide if she wants to meet the man who abandoned her when her heart was failing. But until she's old enough to make that choice, you stay away. You take your sobriety and your therapy and your guilt, and you stay the hell away from us. Dora, if you come near us again, I'll have you arrested. If you send presents, I'll throw them away. If you write letters, I'll burn them. You don't exist in our world anymore. Accept it. Move on. Build a different life. Because this one, the one with me and Ruby, that ended when you told the pilot to keep flying. She walked away, back through the gate. Craig heard her voice shift immediately from cold fury to warm affection. Ruby! Come here, birthday girl! Time for cake! Ruby's delighted squeal carried over the fence. Mama, can I have the princess cake? Of course you can, baby. It's your special day. Craig stood there until a neighbor came out and asked if he needed help, the tone making it clear the help being offered was help leaving. Then Craig got in his car and drove away, watching the lake house disappear in his rearview mirror. The house he'd grown up in, now full of laughter and joy that had nothing to do with him. Hook. That night, Craig received a certified letter from Dora's attorney, another letter, another official document, another nail in the coffin. Final notice regarding parental rights termination. The court hearing completed last month with your failure to appear. Ruby Bryan's biological father is now legally recognized as unknown. All parental rights have been permanently terminated. All biological connections have been legally severed. Ms. Bryan and Ruby Bryan request no further contact from Craig Cummins. Any future contact will be prosecuted as harassment and stalking to the fullest extent of the law. You have 30 days to appeal. After that, this decision is permanent and irreversible. Craig stared at the legal language that translated to, "You no longer exist as her father. Not emotionally, not legally, not in any way that matters." He'd been erased completely, and he'd never even fought it, because deep down he knew he deserved it. Chapter 9. The Breaking. 4 years after Craig chose paradise, he stood outside Ruby's kindergarten in the rain, watching through the fence as his daughter played with other children. And when she looked directly at him and then away without recognition, he finally understood that being forgotten is worse than being hated. Craig's life had contracted to almost nothing: work, sleep, therapy he could barely afford, AA meetings in church basements. That was it. That was everything. The construction job was brutal. 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, in all weather, doing work that destroyed his body. His hands were permanently scarred now. His back ached constantly. He'd aged a decade in 4 years. At 44, he looked 60. His studio apartment was in the worst part of town now. Couldn't afford anything better. The walls were water-stained. The heat worked intermittently. His neighbors dealt drugs 2 doors down. But it was shelter. It was something. It was more than he deserved. His former life felt like a dream someone else had lived. The luxury condo, the expensive cars, the business empire, the beautiful wife, the future that had seemed inevitable. All gone. All ashes. All consequence. He'd stopped trying to contact Dora years ago. The restraining orders, the legal threats, the complete futility of it. He'd accepted that part of his punishment, accepted that he'd destroyed that connection so thoroughly there was no rebuilding it, but he couldn't stop himself from driving by Ruby's school sometimes, just to see her, just to know she existed, just to remind himself that somewhere out there was a person who carried his DNA, who proved he'd existed once, even if she didn't know it. The kindergarten had a playground with a chain-link fence. During recess, Craig would park down the street, walk past like he was going somewhere, and watch for a few minutes. Never long, never obviously, just glimpses, stolen moments of seeing the daughter who'd been legally erased from his life. One Tuesday afternoon, it was raining lightly. Most parents would have kept their kids home, but Dora wasn't most parents. Dora believed in consistency and routine and not letting weather dictate life. So Ruby was at school. Craig stood under a tree across the street, hood up, watching through the fence. Ruby was on the swings with other children, her yellow raincoat bright against the grey sky. Almost 6 years old now, tall for her age, confident, laughing, so alive, so healthy. The heart that had almost failed was beating strong now. The body that had been covered in tubes and wires was running and jumping and living. She was perfect, and she was someone else's daughter now, Dora's daughter, only Dora's daughter. Ruby jumped off the swing, ran after a ball that had rolled near the fence, ran close enough that Craig could see her face clearly for the first time in months. She'd lost her front tooth, had a scrape on her knee that was healing. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, with a clip shaped like a butterfly. She bent to pick up the ball, and as she straightened, her eyes met Craig's. He froze, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Ruby stared at him, not with fear, not with recognition, just confusion, the way you'd look at any stranger standing in the rain watching a playground. Craig raised his hand slightly, waved. Ruby tilted her head, studying him. Then a teacher called her name. "Ruby, come back, not too close to the fence." And she turned away, running back to her friends, the ball tucked under her arm. She didn't look back, didn't wonder who he was, didn't care. He was nothing to her, less than nothing. Background noise, a random person in a world full of random people. Craig stood there for 10 more minutes after the children went inside, rain soaking through his jacket, staring at the empty playground. She'd looked directly at him and felt nothing, known nothing, remembered nothing. He was forgotten, completely forgotten. That night his AA sponsor called. Craig had missed the meeting. Again. "You okay?" the sponsor asked. His name was Tom, former alcoholic, 10 years sober, knew all the excuses. "No." "You drinking?" "No. Just no." "Talk to me, Craig." Craig told him about the fence, about Ruby, about how she'd looked at him like he was nothing. Tom listened without interrupting. When Craig finished, Tom was quiet for a long time. Then, "Maybe it's time to accept that some things can't be fixed, some mistakes are permanent. Some losses are forever. She's my daughter. Biologically, yeah. But parents are the people who show up, man. You know that. The courts know that. Your daughter knows that, even if she doesn't have words for it yet. Maybe the healthiest thing you can do, for her and for you, is let her go. Stop torturing yourself watching through fences. Stop hoping for something that's never going to happen. Accept what is and try to build some kind of life with what you have left." "What if I don't have anything left?" "Then you build from nothing. People do it every day. But you can't build while you're still standing outside playgrounds in the rain, watching a life you're not part of anymore." Craig couldn't respond. Tom stayed on the line, just breathing, just being there. Finally, Tom said, "Come to the meeting tomorrow. Please, don't stay alone with this." Craig went, sat in the circle, listened to other people's stories of loss and regret and survival. Didn't share, just listened. After the meeting, he went home to his studio apartment, sat on the edge of his mattress, pulled up his phone. He'd followed Dora's life through business news and social media for years, watching from distance like watching through that fence, never commenting, never interacting, just observing. He searched her name, found article after article. Real estate mogul Dora Bryan expands empire. Single mother CEO named Businesswoman of the Year. The woman who built an empire from tragedy. Forbes had done a profile last month. He read it on his cracked phone screen, the words blurring. Dora Bryan doesn't talk about her ex-husband. When asked about being a single mother, she simply says, "Ruby and I are a team. We're enough together." That self-sufficiency has defined Bryan's approach to both motherhood and business. She operates without partners, without co-CEOs, without splitting control. "I learned that relying on other people is dangerous," Bryan tells Forbes. "I'm enough on my own. My daughter and I are enough together. We don't need anyone else." The article included photos. Dora in board meetings, looking powerful and severe. Dora at charity events, looking elegant and controlled. Dora with Ruby at a mother-daughter luncheon. Both smiling, both happy, both complete without him. There was no man in any photo. Dora had done it all alone, raised Ruby alone, built her empire alone, proved that Craig had been unnecessary, that his presence would have been a burden, that his absence was freedom. Every article was proof that he'd been right to stay away, that they were better off without him, that some mistakes were so catastrophic they couldn't be survived, couldn't be redeemed, couldn't be anything but permanent. Craig wrote one final letter that night, not to send. He had a drawer full of unsent letters to Ruby, hundreds of them over the years, pages and pages of apologies and explanations and love that would never reach her. "Ruby, you're almost 6 now. You don't know me. You don't remember me. That's my fault. That's what I deserve. One day you might ask about your father. This letter is for that day. I want you to know, I'm sorry. I've been sorry every single day since the day you were born. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't make me a parent. Sorry is just a word that means nothing without action, and I've had no actions that matter. Your mother is extraordinary. You're lucky to have her. She saved you. She saved herself. She built an amazing life for you without me. You're alive because of her. You're happy because of her. You're everything good because of her. I loved you, even though I had no right to. I'll always love you, even though you'll never know. Even though you shouldn't care. I hope you have the most beautiful life. I hope you never think about me. I hope the day you asked about your father, your mother's answer was enough, because she's been enough for you all along. Craig. He folded the letter and put it in the drawer with all the others. Hundreds of unsent apologies. A monument to futility. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived at Craig's apartment. No return address, hand-delivered. Inside was a photograph. Dora and Ruby at Ruby's kindergarten graduation ceremony, both wearing caps and gowns, Ruby holding a certificate, both smiling brighter than sunlight. On the back, in Dora's handwriting, "She's 6 now, healthy, thriving, top of her class. She doesn't ask about you, hasn't asked about you in years. Thought you should know what you're missing. Also thought you should know that I've seen you watching her school. I've known for months. I let it continue because I thought you'd eventually stop on your own. You haven't, so I'm telling you now. Stop. Move on with your life. This is the last communication you'll ever receive from us. The last photo. The last acknowledgement. After this, you're truly gone. That's mercy. Accept it." Craig turned the photo over, stared at his daughter's face, the face that had looked at him through a fence with no recognition, and finally understood that Dora wasn't being cruel. She was being merciful. She was ending the torture of false hope. She was cutting the last thread, and that thread snapping was the kindest thing anyone had done for him in years. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Craig was scraping rust off scaffolding when his foreman yelled that some lawyer needed to see him immediately, and the moment he saw Dora step out of that black car, he knew his years of punishment were about to end in a way he never imagined. The construction site was chaos, hammering, machinery screaming, men yelling instructions over the noise. Craig was 40 feet up on scaffolding, safety harness digging into his shoulders, hands raw and bleeding from working without proper gloves because he couldn't afford new ones. His body was a catalogue of injuries, permanent damage to his back from lifting, scarring on his hands from accidents, hearing loss from years of industrial noise without protection. He looked down through dust and bright summer sun. A black Mercedes was parked at the construction site entrance. Expensive, wrong, out of place. Someone in a tailored suit was talking to the foreman, who pointed up at Craig. Craig climbed down slowly, his back protesting every movement. Got to the ground, wiping rust and sweat from his face with his shirt. As he got closer, he recognized her. Dora. She looked powerful in a way that hurt to see. Designer suit that probably cost more than Craig made in 6 months. Heels. Hair pulled back in that severe style that had become her signature. The woman who'd not just survived him, but transcended him completely. Craig's hands were shaking. "What are you doing here? Get in the car." Her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone giving instructions to an employee. "Why?" "Because Ruby asked about you." The scaffolding could have fallen on Craig's head and it wouldn't have hit harder. "What?" "Get in the car, Craig. We're going to have a conversation, now." Craig looked at his foreman, who shrugged, then back at Dora. He got in the car, leaving rust stains on her expensive leather seats. She didn't comment. They drove in silence. Craig didn't know where they were going. His mind was spinning, unable to process that Ruby had asked about him, after all these years, after complete absence. She'd asked. What did she ask? Craig finally managed. Dora's jaw tightened. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road. "She's 6 now, old enough to notice things. She noticed her friends have fathers. Asked why she doesn't." Craig's breath caught in his throat. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." Dora's voice was hard as steel. That her biological father chose a vacation over her life when she was being born. That he wasn't there for any of it, the surgeries, the therapy, the growing up. That he made a choice, and I made a choice. And we all lived with those choices. The words were precision strikes, each one landing exactly where it would hurt most. "She asked if you were dead," Dora continued. "I said no. I said you were alive somewhere and chose not to be here, which is worse than dead, honestly. Dead means you had no choice. Alive means you had every choice and chose wrong." "That's not—" "I tried—" Dora pulled the car over abruptly, jerking to a stop on a quiet street, turned to face Craig fully for the first time. "You want to talk about trying? Let me tell you about trying, Craig." Her voice was still controlled, but something dangerous was building underneath, something held back by pure force of will. For 6 years, I've done this completely alone. Every nightmare Ruby had after surgery, I was there, alone. Every milestone, every sickness, every moment of joy or terror, just me. Do you have any idea what it's like to run a company during the day and come home to a child who needs you for everything at night? To have no life outside work and parenting, to be so exhausted you can't remember if you ate that day, to fall asleep at stoplights because you haven't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. Craig couldn't speak. I built an empire, Dora said, not a company, an empire. From rage at you, from desperation to provide for Ruby, from knowing that if I failed, she had nobody else. I became powerful because I had to, because you left us with no choice. And you know what the worst part is? She paused, her eyes locked on his. I'm grateful you left. Because if you'd stayed, I would have stayed weak. I would have relied on you. I would have never become this. Your leaving forced me to become someone who didn't need anyone. So thank you, Craig. Thank you for abandoning us. Thank you for choosing that beach. Thank you for making me unstoppable. Dora, I'm sorry. Ruby wants to meet you, she interrupted. Once. I'm allowing it. Not because you deserve it. Because she deserves to know the truth firsthand, instead of just hearing it from me. Craig's heart stopped, started again. Really? When? Can I? But here are my rules. Dora's voice went hard, final. You get 1 hour, supervised, in my home. You tell her exactly why you weren't there. You don't lie, you don't soften it. You tell her you chose a vacation over her life, and then you disappear. No visits after, no letters, no contact. You give her closure, answer her questions, and then you leave us alone forever. That's the deal. The hope that had flared died instantly. 1 hour? And then never again? That's more than you gave us when Ruby was dying. Dora started the car again. Take it or leave it. I'll drive you back to your construction site either way. They drove to Dora's house, a beautiful home Craig had never seen, in a neighborhood that represented everything he'd lost. She led him inside without speaking. The house was filled with photos of Ruby growing up. Birthday parties, school events, mother-daughter moments. A life documented in frames. A life Craig wasn't in. Ruby was in the living room with Nora. She looked up when they entered. 6 years old. Beautiful. With Dora's eyes and Craig's nose, and a combination of genetics that created something entirely her own. Ruby, Dora said gently, sitting beside her daughter on the couch. This is Craig. He's your biological father. Ruby studied Craig with the brutal honesty of children. You're my father. Craig nodded, kneeling down so he was at her eye level, tears already streaming down his face. Yes. Why weren't you there? Ruby's voice was high and young, but the question was devastating. When I was a baby, when I was sick, Mama said you weren't there. Why? Craig had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, had practiced answers, but faced with this perfect child, all his rehearsed words died. Because I was selfish, he said, his voice breaking. Because I made the worst choice anyone can make. Your mama was in the hospital having you, and I was on a plane going on vacation. The doctor called me and told me you both needed me, and I chose to keep going instead of turning around. I chose to have fun instead of being there for you and your mama, and I'll regret that choice every single day for the rest of my life. Ruby processed this with 6-year-old logic. That was really stupid. Craig laughed through tears. Yes, it was the stupidest thing anyone has ever done. Do you love me? The question shattered him. So much, even though I don't deserve to, even though I have no right to. I love you so much, Ruby. Ruby looked at Dora. Mama, can he visit sometimes? So I can know him? Dora's face softened, looking at Ruby. But when she looked at Craig, there was only steel. Some people don't get second chances, baby. Some mistakes are too big to fix. Ruby thought about this with the serious consideration children give to important things. Then, okay, she looked back at Craig. I forgive you for being stupid, but I don't need you. I have Mama. She's enough. She's always been enough. Those words, "she's enough," destroyed Craig utterly and completely. Ruby slid off the couch, walked to Dora, climbed into her mother's lap. Didn't hug Craig, didn't even look at him again, just settled against Dora like that was home, because it was. Dora held Ruby tight, looked at Craig over their daughter's head. "You should go now." "Will I ever see her again?" Craig's voice was barely a whisper. Dora's answer was quiet, final, absolute. "When she's 18, if she wants to find you, I won't stop her. But until then, you live with this. You live knowing she's out there, happy and whole, with just me, that I raised her alone, that I built everything alone, that your absence didn't break us, it made us stronger. That's your punishment, knowing we never needed you at all." Craig stood on shaking legs. Ruby was already showing Dora a drawing she'd made, talking about her day, completely absorbed in normal life with her mother. Dora caught his eye one last time. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held their daughter closer and let Craig see exactly what he'd lost. Outside, Craig sat in his car for a long time. Then he called Dr. Patel, his therapist. "How did it go?" she asked gently. Craig's voice was hollow, empty. "She said her mother was enough. And the hell of it is, she's right. Dora is enough. Ruby doesn't need me, never did. I destroyed everything for nothing and they built paradise without me." Silence on the line. Then, "So what now?" "Now I live with it. Now I accept it. Now I stop hoping and start accepting. Because that's all I have left."